The screen of my phone lit up with a message that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Unknown number. 3 simple words. Watch your back. I'm Jade, and until this moment, my biggest concern had been meeting my deadline for a piece about sustainable gardening. Now, sitting in my favorite coffee shop, my laptop forgotten, I kept reading those words over and over, trying to decode their meaning. Earth to Jade? Clara waved her hand in front of my face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Look at this. I slid my phone across the table, leaving a trail in the spilled coffee neither of us had bothered to wipe up. Clara's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. Probably just spam. Delete it. No. I shook my head, pulling up the message details. The number's local, and look at the timing. Right after Ryan told his parents about moving in together. You're being paranoid. Clara took a long sip of her latte. Margaret's a piece of work, sure, but threatening texts? That's a bit much, even for her. The barista called out another order, making me jump. My hands were shaking as I took my phone back. You weren't at dinner last week. You didn't see her face when Ryan mentioned the apartment. It was like someone had just announced the apocalypse. Religious people can be intense about living together before marriage. This is different. I opened my notes app, typing quickly. First, the accidental deletion of our apartment viewing appointments from Ryan's calendar. Then the sudden family emergencies every time we planned to go furniture shopping. Now this? My phone buzzed again. Another message. Ask Ryan about April 15th. Holy shit, Clara whispered, reading over my shoulder. Okay, maybe you're not paranoid. I was already dialing Ryan's number, straight to voicemail. My stomach twisted into knots as I remembered him mentioning lunch with his parents today. He's with them right now. Jade. Clara's voice had that careful tone she used when she thought I was about to do something stupid. Maybe you should wait. For what? For them to succeed in whatever they're planning? I stood up, gathering my things. I'm going to the restaurant. At least let me come with you. No. I shouldered my bag. I need to handle this myself. The 15-minute walk to Giovanni's felt like an eternity. Through the window, I could see them. Ryan's tall frame hunched slightly, the way it always was around his parents. Margaret's perfect posture, her hands gesturing as she spoke. Henry's military straight back, nodding along with whatever she was saying. My phone buzzed one more time. They're showing him the photos right now. Photos? What photos? Through the glass, I watched Ryan's face change. Saw him push back from the table. Saw Margaret reach for his hand. Saw him let her take it. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, as pieces started falling into place. April 15th, the day I'd met with my publisher about my book deal. The day I'd celebrated at that bar with Clara. The day someone had apparently taken photos that Margaret Bennett thought would destroy everything. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a call. Evelyn's name flashed on the screen. Don't go in there, she said before I could speak. Meet me at Park Square in 20 minutes. There's something you need to know. I looked back through the window. Ryan was staring at something on the table. Photos, I assumed, while Margaret spoke intently, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the surface for emphasis. Henry sat back, arms crossed, wearing the same expression he'd had when he'd first met me and asked about my real job prospects. Okay, I said to Evelyn, turning away from the scene. But you better tell me everything. As I walked toward Park Square, my phone chimed one final time. The game has begun. Choose your moves carefully. I deleted the message, straightened my shoulders, and picked up my pace. If Margaret Bennett wanted to play games, she was about to learn that literature graduates know all about tragic endings and how to write them. Evelyn was already waiting at Park Square when I arrived, perched on a bench like she was ready to bolt at any moment. Her designer outfit couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes, or the way her fingers kept twisting her wedding ring. Those photos they showed Ryan? She didn't wait for me to sit down. They're from the night you were celebrating your book deal. My stomach dropped. What about them? They show you kissing someone. Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper. A man who isn't Ryan. That's impossible. I grabbed her arm. I never. The photos are doctored. She pulled out her phone, swiping through a series of images. Look closely. See how the lighting doesn't quite match? Mother hired someone to create these. She has connections. The photos showed me at the bar with Clara, but in several shots, there was a man I'd never seen before, getting progressively closer until the final image showed us kissing. The manipulation was subtle, professional grade. Why are you showing me this? Evelyn's laugh was bitter. Because 3 years ago, she did the same thing to me. Different scenario, same result. My husband left me before I could prove they were fake. My phone buzzed. Ryan, we need to talk. Coming over now. He's coming to my place. I stood up, my legs shaky. I have to. Wait. Evelyn grabbed my wrist. There's more. Mother's plan isn't just to break you up. She wants to destroy your credibility before your book launches. She knows a scandal could tank your career before it starts. How do you know all this? Because I'm supposed to be helping her. Evelyn's eyes met mine. I've been playing along, feeding her information, but I'm done being her puppet. I made it home just before Ryan arrived. He stood in my doorway, looking lost in a way I'd never seen before. The photos were clutched in his hand. Tell me they're not real. His voice cracked. They're not. I reached for the photos, but he pulled back. Ryan, look at me. Your mother had them created. Evelyn told me everything. Evelyn? He laughed, harsh and hollow. The sister who hasn't spoken to us in 3 years? That's your source? She hasn't spoken to you because your mother… Stop! He pressed his fingers to his temples. Just stop blaming my mother for everything. These photos are fake. I pulled up the images Evelyn had sent me. Look at the lighting inconsistencies. Look at how the man's shadow falls wrong in every shot. Your mother hired someone to… You really expect me to believe she'd do that? Yes! I grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at me. Because she did the same thing to Evelyn. Ask her yourself. Ask her why she really got divorced. Ryan's phone rang. Margaret's name lit up the screen. He answered it on speaker, his hands trembling. Darling, are you with her? Margaret's voice dripped concern. Your father and I are so worried. We hate seeing you hurt like this. I'm fine, Mother. Ryan's eyes never left mine. We're just talking. About the photos? Sweetheart, I know it's painful, but you deserve the truth. We've already spoken to a lawyer about… A lawyer? I cut in. For what exactly, Margaret? There was a pause. Ryan, you have her on speaker? That's incredibly inappropriate. This is a family matter. I am his family. The words came out sharp enough to cut. And I know about Evelyn's photos, the ones you had doctored 3 years ago. Should we talk about those? The silence stretched for 5 long seconds. Ryan, Margaret's voice had hardened. Come home, now. Your father and I need to discuss something important with you. No. The word seemed to surprise Ryan as much as it did me. Not until you tell me the truth about Evelyn's divorce. That situation was completely different. Was it? Ryan's voice gained strength. Because right now, Mother, I'm starting to see some pretty disturbing patterns. Another pause. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was ice. You sound tired, darling. Confused. Come home, and we'll sort this all out. Ryan ended the call. His hands were steady now, but his face had gone pale. I need time to think. Ryan? Please. He backed toward the door. Just give me time. After he left, my phone buzzed with a new message from the unknown number. Round 1 goes to you, but Margaret Bennett plays the long game. Hope you're ready for round 2. I looked at the photos again, at the careful manipulation of truth, at the calculated destruction of relationships. Then I texted Evelyn. I'm in. Let's take her down. Evelyn's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from someone trying to erase their past. Minimalist, modern, and completely devoid of family photos. We sat at her kitchen island, spreading out documents like we were planning a heist. Mother keeps everything, Evelyn said, sliding a folder toward me. Tax records, bank statements, private investigator receipts. She's meticulous about documenting her victories. I opened the folder and my hands started shaking. These go back years. Look at the pattern. Evelyn pointed to various dates. Every time one of us tried to break free, she orchestrated a crisis. My divorce. Ryan's rejected job offer in Seattle. Even Dad's sudden health scare when I tried moving to Boston. My phone buzzed. Ryan. Can't make dinner tonight. Family emergency. Let me guess, Evelyn said, watching my face. Mother's having one of her episodes? Before I could answer, my laptop pinged with an email notification. My publisher's name appeared in bold. Urgent, concerning recent allegations. No, I whispered, opening the email. She wouldn't, but she had. Someone had sent my publisher anonymous evidence suggesting my book was plagiarized. The email contained side-by-side comparisons with another author's work, carefully selected passages that looked damning out of context. I told you. Evelyn's voice was gentle. She doesn't just break relationships, she breaks futures. My phone rang. Clara. Jade, have you seen the literary blog posts? They're saying, I know. I cut her off, my voice steady despite the room spinning. Margaret's moving faster than we expected. What are you going to do? I looked at Evelyn, who was already pulling up more documents on her laptop. We're going to show Ryan exactly who his mother is. Tonight. The drive to the Bennett house felt like entering enemy territory. Evelyn's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel as we pulled up to the massive colonial home. Ready? She asked. No, I admitted. But we're doing this anyway. The front door opened before we could knock. Henry stood there, his military posture perfect as ever. Evelyn? For the first time, I saw surprise crack his facade. What are you? Where's Ryan? She pushed past him, her confidence clearly throwing him off balance. Margaret appeared in the hallway, her face going pale at the sight of her daughter. Evelyn? This isn't a good time. Ryan's resting. No, I'm not. Ryan appeared at the top of the stairs, looking exhausted. His eyes widened when he saw us. Jade? Evelyn? What's going on? Show him, I said to Evelyn. She pulled out her phone, connecting it to the TV in the living room. Documents appeared on the screen. Bank statements, emails, private investigator reports, years of Margaret's careful manipulation laid bare. What is this? Henry stepped forward, but Margaret grabbed his arm. It's nothing, she said quickly. Old business documents? It's evidence, Evelyn's voice cut through the room, of every life you've destroyed to maintain control, including mine. Ryan moved closer to the screen, reading. His face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, horror. The job offer in Seattle, that was you? I was protecting you. Margaret's voice took on that familiar soothing tone. You weren't ready. I was 27! Ryan's shout made us all jump. And now, Jade's book? The plagiarism claims? That was you too? Margaret's mask slipped just for a moment. It was all the confirmation we needed. Ryan, Henry stepped forward. Your mother only wants... Stop. Ryan held up his hand. Just stop defending her. He turned to Margaret. Why? Why do this to people you claim to love? The silence stretched thin enough to snap. Then Margaret smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Because love without control is chaos, she said softly, and I won't let my family descend into chaos. My phone buzzed one final time. Round 3 begins. Hope you're ready for what comes next. I looked at Ryan, saw the devastation on his face as his mother's true nature emerged, saw Evelyn's years of pain finally finding voice, saw Henry's blind loyalty beginning to crack. This wasn't just about saving my relationship anymore. This was about ending Margaret Bennett's reign of control, once and for all. I stepped forward, meeting her cold smile with one of my own. Bring it on. The morning after our confrontation with Margaret, my publisher dropped my book deal. The email was carefully worded. Concerns about creative integrity, and brand reputation. I deleted it without finishing, my hands steady as I poured another cup of coffee. Ryan hadn't come home last night. His text just said, "Need space to think." Clara sat across from me at her kitchen table, scrolling through the online fallout. The plagiarism accusations are everywhere. How did she get it to spread so fast? Margaret Bennett has friends in high places. I watch the steam rise from my cup. Evelyn says she's been cultivating these connections for decades. My phone lit up with a text from Ryan. "Meeting with a family lawyer today. Need to understand some things. Talk later?" Before I could respond, another message appeared from the unknown number. "Choices have consequences. Ask Henry about September 12th, 1992. "What's that date?" Clara asked, reading over my shoulder. "No idea." I pulled up my laptop. "But I'm about to find out." 3 hours of research later, I found it. A small newspaper article about a local business scandal. Henry Bennett's name appeared in connection with missing funds, but the investigation mysteriously disappeared. The date? September 12th, 1992. My phone rang. "Evelyn. Did you get a message about September 1992? Her voice was tight. "Yes. How did you?" "Mother's having a meltdown. I've never seen her like this. The date triggered something." I heard shouting in the background, then Henry's voice. "Margaret, calm down! You promised we'd never speak of it." Margaret's voice shrill and broken. "You promised!" The call cut off. My phone buzzed again. "Ryan, come to the house. Now!" The scene I walked into was chaos. Margaret sat rigid in her armchair, Henry hovering nearby. Ryan stood by the fireplace, holding what looked like old documents. Evelyn was perched on the sofa's arm, watching everyone like she was calculating escape routes. "Show her," Ryan said to his father. Henry's military posture crumbled. "Son, some things are better left." "Show her," Ryan repeated. "Or I will." Henry moved to a bookshelf, pulled out a thick leather album. His hands shook as he extracted a yellowed envelope. "The missing money," he said quietly. "It wasn't missing. Margaret used it to pay off someone who threatened to expose something from her past." "What's something?" I asked. "Don't." Margaret's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Henry, I forbid." "You forbid?" Ryan laughed, harsh and hollow. "Like you forbid me from taking the Seattle job? Like you forbid Evelyn from moving to Boston? Like you're trying to forbid my relationship with Jade? I protected you." Margaret stood, her perfect facade cracking. "All of you, everything I did, was about control," Evelyn finished, "not protection." "You don't understand," Margaret whispered. "If people knew, if they found out." "Found out what?" I stepped forward. "What's worth destroying your children's lives to keep hidden?" The room went silent. Margaret's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. "Tell them," Henry said softly. "Or the private investigator I hired will." Margaret's head snapped toward him. "You what?" "Enough secrets." Henry's voice hardened. "Enough manipulation. Tell them, or I will." My phone buzzed one final time. "The truth changes everything. Ready for the real game to begin?" I looked at Ryan, saw the conflict in his eyes as he watched his family implode. Saw Evelyn's quiet determination, saw Henry's resigned acceptance. And Margaret? She looked like a queen watching her kingdom crumble. "Fine," she said, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "You want the truth? Here it is." But before she could continue, Ryan held up his hand. "Wait!" He turned to me. "Jade, you should know. Whatever we learn here, it might change everything." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm counting on it." Because sometimes, I was learning, revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about forcing the truth into the light, no matter how ugly it might be. Margaret took a deep breath and began to speak. Margaret's truth hit the room like a grenade. "I killed someone. September 12th, 1992. A man who threatened to expose my past. The missing money wasn't just a payoff, It was to clean up my mistake. The silence that followed felt like drowning. Ryan's face went blank. Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth. And Henry? Henry just looked tired. It was an accident, Margaret continued, her voice eerily calm. He was blackmailing me about my first marriage, the one nobody knows about. He had proof that I'd been married before, that I'd abandoned my husband when I met Henry. If the church had found out. So you killed him? Ryan's voice cracked. I pushed him. He fell, hit his head. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. Henry helped me cover it up. My phone buzzed. Now you know why she's so good at making people disappear. All these years, Evelyn whispered. Every time you destroyed someone's relationships, ruined their lives, it was because you were afraid they'd discover this? I protected this family. Margaret stood, her composure cracking. Everything I did was to keep us safe, to keep our reputation. You protected yourself, I cut in. Ryan's job, Evelyn's marriage, my career. None of that threatened your secret. You just couldn't bear losing control. Margaret turned to me, and I saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. You think you understand? You think you can judge me? I've buried worse secrets than you can imagine. Mother, Ryan stepped forward, but she held up her hand. You want the whole truth? Fine. The man I killed? He was blackmailing me because he knew what happened to my first husband. He didn't just disappear, I made him disappear. And Henry's known all along. The room spun. 2 deaths, not 1. My phone lit up again. Check the garden, under the old rose bushes. Bring a shovel. I showed the message to Ryan. His face went ash white. The roses, he whispered. Dad planted those the summer we moved in. Mother always said never to disturb them. Enough! Henry's voice cut through the tension. Margaret, it's over. I've already called the police. Margaret laughed, high and brittle. No, you haven't. Because you're as guilty as I am. Every cover-up, every lie, every manipulation. You helped me, protected me, loved me. Not anymore. Henry pulled out his phone, showed us the screen. A sent message to the local police department, time-stamped 10 minutes ago. Margaret's face transformed into something I didn't recognize. You betrayed me? After everything we've built? Sirens wailed in the distance. Ryan! Margaret turned to her son, suddenly soft, pleading. Help me leave, now, before they come. I'm still your mother. Ryan looked at me, then at Evelyn, then back at his mother. I could see the weight of choice crushing him. My phone buzzed one last time. Choose wisely. Some family secrets should stay buried. But I was done with secrets, done with manipulation, done with watching this woman destroy lives to protect her own. Ryan, I said quietly, whatever you decide, I'm calling the forensics team about those roses. The sirens grew closer. Margaret's eyes darted between us all, calculating, planning. I could almost see her mind working, searching for another way to regain control. I have proof, she said suddenly. About everyone. Insurance, I called it. One call, and I can destroy all of you. Even you, Jade. Especially you. But something had shifted. The threat felt hollow, desperate. The queen was losing her kingdom, and she knew it. Blue lights flashed through the windows. Car doors slammed outside. Ryan, Margaret whispered one last time. Please. He stepped back, taking my hand. No more, Mother. No more disappearing acts. As the police entered, Margaret straightened her spine, smoothed her skirt, and smiled that perfect society smile. But her eyes promised war. My phone stayed silent. Whoever had been sending those messages had accomplished their goal. The truth was out, the damage done. But as I watched the police lead Margaret away, I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much darker. Because some secrets, once unearthed, take on a life of their own. The forensics team found 3 bodies under the rose bushes, not 1. I watched from the kitchen window as they excavated Margaret's perfect garden, each discovery making Ryan flinch beside me. Your mother's asking for you, Detective Morris said, entering without knocking. Says she'll only talk if you come alone. He's not going, I said, but Ryan was already reaching for his coat. I have to know, Jade. His voice sounded hollow. All these years. Who else did she— My phone buzzed. Margaret's not done playing. Hope you're ready to lose everything. The holding cell made Margaret look smaller, more human, but her eyes were sharp as ever when Ryan sat down across from her. Tell them I want a deal, she said, ignoring me standing in the corner. Full immunity in exchange for the locations. There are more bodies, Ryan. So many more. How many? His voice cracked. Enough to destroy this family forever. She leaned forward. Unless you help me. Don't, I started, but Margaret cut me off. Did you know your father isn't really your father, Ryan? Your real father is in the Rose Garden, plot 3. The room spun. Ryan grabbed the table edge. You're lying, he whispered. Am I? Henry knew. Why do you think he finally turned on me? Guilt's a powerful thing. Her smile was razor sharp. Help me get immunity, and I'll tell you everything. Fight me, and I'll make sure every newspaper knows the Bennett family's true legacy. My phone lit up. Check the basement, behind the wine rack. Hurry! Ryan, I showed him the message. We need to— Go, he said, not looking away from Margaret. I'll handle this. The Bennett house was crawling with police, but I knew where Henry kept the spare key. The basement was dark, musty. The wine rack looked innocent enough until I noticed the scratches on the floor. It moved easily, revealing a small safe. The combination was Ryan's birthday, Henry's one sentimental weakness. Inside, I found a USB drive and a letter addressed to Ryan. My phone buzzed again. Play it, now. The video showed Margaret, younger but unmistakable, arguing with a man who looked eerily like Ryan. You can't take him, she was saying. He's mine now, mine and Henry's. He's my son, the man stepped forward. You think I don't know what you did to Sarah? To Michael? How many others, Margaret? You have no proof. I have everything, the photos, the letters, the camera shook. A thud. Then silence. The timestamp matched plot 3 in the garden. My hands were shaking as I opened the letter. Henry's handwriting was precise, military. Ryan, I protected her because I loved her, because I thought I could save her. But I was wrong. The truth is in safety deposit box 247 at First National. The key is where we buried your dog. I'm sorry. Henry. My phone rang. Clara. Jade, turn on the news. Now. I fumbled with my phone's browser. The headline made my blood freeze. Henry Bennett found dead in police custody. Apparent suicide. Another message from the unknown number. Margaret always wins. Always. I ran back to the station, but I was too late. The holding cell was empty. The detective looked shell-shocked. She had help, he said. Inside help. She's gone. Ryan sat in the interrogation room. Henry's letter crumpled in his fist. She killed him. She killed my real father, then made Henry help cover it up. And now— We'll find her, I said, but the words felt empty. My phone buzzed one last time. The game isn't over. It's just moving to the next generation. Watch your back, Jade. Margaret taught me everything she knows. Love, Evelyn. The timestamp showed it was sent hours ago, before everything fell apart. I looked at Ryan, saw the devastation in his eyes, the weight of generations of secrets crushing him. Saw our future crumbling under the weight of his mother's legacy. And I realized that sometimes, when you dig for truth, you don't find justice. You just find more graves. The key was exactly where Henry said it would be, buried with Rex's old collar in the backyard. I stood in First National Bank, safety deposit box 247, open before me, while Ryan paced behind me. Just read it, he said. The file was thick with photos, letters, and a single USB drive. But it was the handwritten confession on top that made my hands shake. My dearest Ryan, Henry's words blurred as I read aloud. By now you know about your father. What you don't know is that Evelyn orchestrated everything. She's Margaret's true protege. Always has been. My phone buzzed. Look behind you. Hello, little brother. Evelyn's voice was silk over steel. Mother sends her regards. The bank's private viewing room suddenly felt like a trap. Evelyn stood in the doorway, elegant as ever, but something had changed in her eyes. Something had broken loose. You played us perfectly, I said, keeping my voice steady. The concerned sister, the ally. The author of every anonymous text? She smiled. Someone had to push you toward the truth, make you dig deeper, make Ryan see what Mother really is. Why? Ryan's voice cracked. Because Mother's time was done. Her methods were outdated. Evelyn stepped into the room, closing the door. But her legacy? That's mine now. The bodies in the garden, I said. You knew about them all along. I helped put some of them there, she shrugged. Mother taught me well, but she forgot one thing. Every queen eventually faces a coup. My phone lit up with a message from Clara. Police en route. Keep her talking. So what now? I moved slightly, putting myself between Evelyn and Ryan. You take over Margaret's empire of secrets? Keep manipulating people's lives? Oh, Jade. Evelyn's laugh was chilling. I'm going to do so much more than that. Mother only destroyed individuals. I'm going to reshape entire families. You're insane, Ryan whispered. Oh, I'm evolved. Evelyn pulled out her phone. And now, thanks to you both, I have everything I need. The evidence, the connections, the perfect tragic story of a family destroyed by secrets. She smiled. My book will be so much better than yours, Jade. The pieces clicked into place. The plagiarism accusations, that was you? Mother's idea, my execution. And now? She held up her phone. One call, and every newspaper gets the full story. The Bennett family tragedy. The murderous mother, the complicit father, the innocent son, and the girlfriend who exposed it all for her own gain. That's not what happened. Truth is whatever I say it is. Her smile widened. Just like Mother taught me. Footsteps in the hallway. Evelyn's eyes darted to the door. You can't run forever, I said. Eventually, the truth. The truth? She laughed. The truth is that Mother's already out of the country. The truth is that Henry died protecting her secrets. The truth is that Ryan's real father wasn't the only one in that garden. Ask yourself, Jade, who was Sarah? Who was Michael? How deep does this really go? The door burst open. Detective Morris led the charge, but Evelyn was already moving. Her hand slipped into her bag. One more truth, she said, backing toward the second exit. I learned more than just manipulation from Mother. The flash of metal was my only warning. I shoved Ryan aside as the shot rang out. Pain exploded in my shoulder. Through the chaos that followed, I heard Evelyn's voice one last time. Family is forever, little brother. See you at Christmas. She vanished into the bank's emergency exit, leaving us with Henry's files, a USB drive full of secrets, and the weight of generations of manipulation. My phone buzzed with a final message, this time from Margaret herself. You wanted the truth? Here it is. You can't escape family. Not really. Ask Ryan about his daughter. The one he doesn't know exists. Yet. I looked at Ryan, saw the color drain from his face as he read the message over my shoulder. Sometimes winning feels exactly like losing, and sometimes the truth is just the beginning of a bigger lie. The USB drive contained a video of Margaret teaching a young Evelyn how to forge documents. Always have proof, she was saying, but keep the real evidence where no one can find it. I watched it in my hospital room, shoulder bandaged, while Ryan paced. The police found more files in Evelyn's apartment, birth certificates, death certificates, adoption papers, and my voice was steadier than I felt. I have a daughter. He stopped pacing. With my college girlfriend. Margaret arranged the adoption, made it look like a stillbirth. She's 6 now. My phone buzzed. Margaret's number. Some truths set you free. Others just give you new chains. Choose wisely. I deleted it without responding. What are you going to do? I asked Ryan. He sat heavily in the visitor's chair. Find her, but not yet. I need to understand who I am first, who my family really is. Clara arrived with coffee and news. They found Margaret's records. Decades of blackmail, manipulation, arranged accidents. The rose garden was just the beginning. And Evelyn? Gone. But she left this. Clara handed me an envelope. Inside was a single photo, Margaret and Evelyn, standing in front of a nursery. The back read, "Family is a choice. Choose better than we did." The detective came next, with questions about Henry's final letter. We found more safety deposit boxes, more evidence. This goes deeper than we thought. Politicians, judges, business leaders, all tangled in Margaret's web. And now Evelyn has the keys to the kingdom, I said. Maybe, he hesitated. Or maybe that's what they want us to think. My phone lit up with an unknown number. Check the hospital security footage from last night. Not everyone who visits is there to heal. The footage showed Margaret, disguised as a nurse, entering my room while I slept. She stood there, watching, then left something under my pillow. I reached beneath it now, found a small key and a note. For when you're ready to understand. Some stories need to be told. Some secrets need to keep breathing. What does it mean? Ryan asked. I thought about Margaret's perfect garden, hiding its dark secrets. About Evelyn's careful manipulation, years in the making. About Henry's final confession and the daughter Ryan never knew existed. It means the story isn't over, I said. It means there's more truth to find. Or more lies to uncover, Clara added. Ryan took my hand. Whatever comes next, we face it together. No more secrets. But even as he said it, I felt the weight of the key Margaret had left, felt the pull of untold stories and buried truths, felt the echo of Evelyn's words about reshaping families. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from a new unknown number. Ready to write the real story? The one about how the Bennett family legacy really began? Check the key against safety deposit box 731 at Central Bank. Some truths can only be told by outsiders. That's why Margaret chose you, Jade. That's why she always knew you'd be the one to tell it. I looked at Ryan, saw the question in his eyes, saw the weight of generations of secrets on his shoulders, saw our future, uncertain but honest. The key felt heavy in my hand. A choice, a responsibility, a story waiting to be told. Because sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge or exposure. It's about understanding. And sometimes the truth isn't something you find. It's something you choose to tell. I closed my hand around the key, made my decision. Some stories need to be told, even if they break our hearts in the telling. Even if they change everything we thought we knew about love, family, and the price of truth. Even if they're not over yet. Not by a long shot.
My name's Joanne. Married young to Tom, my college flame, we thought we'd figured it all out. Foolish, right? Fresh out of college, fueled by love and little else, we dove headfirst into life together. But real life? It hit hard and fast. Our tiny apartment was chaos in the form of endless diapers and late-night cries from our newborn, Sophie. I'd rock her to sleep, exhausted, while Tom was out living it up. Why aren't you home more? I finally asked him one night, my voice cracking from tiredness. Tom, just back from another night with friends, reeked of booze. Joe, relax. Gotta unwind somehow, right? He shrugged, dodging a diaper bag like it was a grenade. Unwind? I echoed, my tone sharper than I intended. I'm here alone with Sophie while you party. This isn't what we agreed on, Tom. Jesus, Joe. I'm just trying to have a little fun. He rolled his eyes, defensive. You used to be fun, remember? That stung. Sure, I remembered. But things change when you're the only adult in the house. The next 2 years were a blur of similar nights. Tom's charm faded fast, eaten away by his selfishness and my growing resentment. Our final blowout was monumental. I'd just paid off a pile of bills, finding our account drained more than usual. "Tom, we need to talk," I started, as soon as he walked in. He looked at me, wary of my tone. "The bank account's nearly empty. Again. What's going on?" "Oh, relax, Joe. I needed some new gear. Got a great deal on a set of golf clubs." "Golf clubs?" I snapped, my patience gone. "While I'm clipping coupons and you're out dropping hundreds? God, you're such a nag." Tom fired back, throwing his keys on the table. "Can't I enjoy my money without your constant bitching? I didn't sign up for this domestic crap." That was it. I knew right then we were done. "If that's how you feel, maybe you should leave," I said quietly, the fight draining out of me. The next day, he packed a bag and left. Just like that. No goodbye to Sophie, no final argument. Just the end of us. Raising Sophie alone wasn't easy. Every day was a test of my will, a balance of work, childcare, and keeping it together so my daughter never felt the hole her father left. I grew up fast, out of necessity. The playful college girl I was disappeared, replaced by a woman who knew how to stand alone. Tom? He sent money, at least. Every month, without fail, alimony arrived. I never told Sophie much about him, didn't want her childhood marred by his choices. She knew her dad wasn't around, and for a long while, that was enough. As she grew, so did her questions about Tom, and they got harder to answer without stirring up old hurts. But I kept things level, never letting bitterness color her view. He was her dad, after all. That respect, that connection, it mattered, for her. Sophie's 18th birthday hit like a milestone. She was already more together than I ever was at her age. Her acceptance letter from a college in the city where my mom lived arrived the same week, setting the stage for a big celebration. "I got in, Mom. I can't believe it." Sophie waved the letter like a victory flag. I pulled her into a tight hug, laughing with her. "I never doubted you for a second. Law school, here you come." The plan was to throw a dinner party, nothing fancy, just family and close friends. And, yeah, Tom. I figured it was time to maybe bridge that gap, for Sophie's sake. I sent him an invite. Didn't expect much, but he surprised us both by showing up. He looked good, which annoyed me more than I wanted to admit. Cleaned up, dressed sharp. When Sophie saw him, her face lit up, and that was worth any awkwardness. "Dad." She rushed over, giving him a big hug. Tom looked a bit stiff, but he hugged her back. "Hey, kiddo. Look at you, all grown up," Tom said, his voice a mix of pride. "And you'll need this. For all your classes and stuff." Sophie's eyes went huge. "Oh my God, Dad, seriously? This is too much." "Nothing's too much for my girl," Tom said, a bit too loudly, like he was trying to prove a point to both of us. The dinner went better than expected. We all chatted, even laughed a bit. Tom kept throwing compliments my way, which I deflected with jokes. Too much water under the bridge for flattery, to scrub it clean. "Joanne, you haven't changed a bit," Tom said as he sipped his wine. "Sure haven't," I replied, dry as toast. "Still don't take crap from anyone, especially not men who think a smartphone can make up for lost time." Tom coughed, almost choking on his wine. "Yeah, well, I'm just trying here, Joanne." Sophie watched us, eyes darting back and forth like she was at a tennis match. I softened a bit. For her. After Sophie left to celebrate her college acceptance with friends, Tom and I found ourselves alone, lingering over the remnants of dinner. The night unexpectedly turned soft and warm, full of old laughter and shared memories. "You know, Joanne, I've missed this, us," Tom confessed as we sat side by side on the couch, our hands tentatively reaching out for each other. I glanced at him, the familiar curve of his smile tugging at my own lips. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've missed this too." One thing led to another, and the evening slipped into a night filled with rekindled passion that I hadn't realized I still harbored for him. By morning, wrapped in the echo of whispered promises and dreams, we decided to give our marriage another shot. Within a few weeks, we were standing in City Hall, exchanging vows once more. It was just Sophie, Tom's sister Linda, and us. Linda had always been a rock, even when Tom and I were at our worst, and her presence at the ceremony meant the world to me. "Really proud of you both," Linda whispered as she hugged us after the ceremony. "Make it count this time, okay?" "We will," I assured her, squeezing Tom's hand. Moving into Tom's house felt like stepping into a new life. It was a beautiful place, spacious and filled with light. Sophie was overjoyed about our reunion, and her visits from college were full of laughter and family dinners that I had sorely missed. For a while, everything seemed perfect. But as the months rolled into a year, I noticed something off. The joint account we had wasn't growing as it should. Bills piled up, and the cushion we'd talked about building was nowhere seen. One evening, I decided to broach the subject. Tom was in his home office, papers strewn about. I knocked lightly before entering. "Tom, can we talk about our finances for a sec?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, a frown creasing his brow. "Yeah, sure. What's up?" I walked over, sitting down across from him. "It's about the joint account. There's barely enough in there to cover the bills, and I noticed you haven't been contributing much lately. What's going on?" Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Joe, I didn't want to worry you, but I've been having some money issues lately." "Money issues? But your job," I started, confusion and worry knitting together in my chest. "It's not as stable as it used to be. I've lost a couple of big clients, and things are tight," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "But why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have figured something out together," I said, feeling both concerned and a little betrayed that he'd kept this from me. "I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want to stress you out," Tom replied, his voice low. I took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the frustration bubbling up inside me. "Tom, we're supposed to be in this together. No more going at things alone, remember?" "You're right, Joe. I'm sorry," he said, finally looking up at me. "I'll figure it out. I promise." But as weeks turned into months, and his promises of resolving his financial woes remained unfulfilled, my doubts grew. Deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps Tom hadn't changed as much as he claimed. Year after year, the gap between Tom's promises and his actions grew wider. Every month, I found myself managing our household alone, every expense paid from my pocket, while Tom paraded his splurges online like some kind of celebrity. One evening, I cornered him as he was uploading yet another video of himself in a rented luxury car. "Tom, we need to talk about the budget. The utility bill is overdue, and the groceries aren't going to buy themselves." He barely glanced up from his phone, his thumbs still tapping away. Yeah, I got it, Joe. I'll transfer some cash tomorrow, okay?" "But you said that last week," I pressed, trying to keep my voice even. "And the week before. We can't keep living like this." Tom sighed, irritation flashing in his eyes as he pocketed his phone. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Everyone thinks we're doing great." "That's the problem, Tom. It's all for show. Friends think we live in luxury because of your damn posts. They don't see me counting every cent, struggling to keep us afloat," I said, my voice rising with every word. "Come on, Joe, you're being dramatic. Look, I got you that necklace you always wanted," he said, attempting to smooth things over with a grin. I touched the expensive piece of jewelry around my neck, a gift that felt more like a bribe. "I didn't need a necklace, Tom. I need a partner. Someone who actually contributes." Tom's face hardened. "I contribute in my own way. Maybe if you weren't so uptight about money, you'd see that." "Uptight? Tom, I'm realistic. Someone has to be," I retorted, exasperated. "You're living in a fantasy world. These gadgets, these cars, it's like you're trying to prove something." Tom scoffed, shaking his head. "What do you want me to do, huh? Sell everything and live like a monk?" No, I want you to grow up. I want you to think about us, about your family, not just your next Instagram post, I said, my words slicing through the tension between us. This conversation, like so many before it, went nowhere. Days turned into weeks, and Tom's habits remained unchanged. The luxury facade continued, each new post a slap in the face of our actual circumstances. Meanwhile, I scrimped and saved, cut corners wherever I could. Groceries were bought on sale, lights were turned off in rooms not used, and every small spare amount was squirreled away for emergencies. My life became a continuous loop of managing disasters before they could happen. The day I got the call from my brother Mike that Mom had passed away hit me like a freight train. She'd been living in the same town where my daughter Sophie attended college, and Sophie had been staying with her, helping out where she could. We decided on a modest service. Mom had never been one for pomp, and we wanted to honor her in a way that felt true to who she was. We took the train to her city, and Sophie met us at the station, looking as heartbroken as I felt. The service was simple, just close family and a few of Mom's longtime friends. I looked around for Tom during the ceremony, needing his support, but he was nowhere to be found. Leaning over to Sophie, I whispered, "Have you seen your dad?" She shook her head, her eyes red. "No, Mom. He was here a minute ago." Tom showed up right as the service was ending, just in time to throw a rose onto the grave, but missing the entire ceremony. I bit my tongue, holding back the wave of irritation and grief that threatened to overwhelm me. That evening, we gathered at Mom's house, a cozy place filled with decades of memories. Mike read out the will in the living room, his voice steady, despite the emotions I knew he was fighting. Mom had left the house to me, and her savings to him. It was what we'd both expected. But Tom's reaction was anything but expected. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the wood floor. "We should sell the house. It's practical and it makes sense financially," he announced, looking around as if expecting agreement. I stared at him, my mouth open in disbelief. "Sell it? Tom, we haven't even had a moment to grieve, and you're talking about selling?" Sophie stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I've been living here with Grandma, Dad. This is my home too. I'm staying." Tom waved her off dismissively. "It's joint property, Joanne. As your husband, I'm entitled to half. We should sell and split the money." Sophie's jaw dropped. "Dad, I'm studying law, remember? Inherited property isn't shared between spouses. It's Mom's to do with as she wishes." His face turned red, and he pointed a finger at her. "Don't you lecture me about law, young lady. Stay out of this." He turned to me, his voice rising. "If you don't sell, Joanne, I'm considering a divorce. Think about what that will mean." The room went silent, everyone staring at us. I felt every eye on me. "Let's talk about this later, Tom. Not here, not now," I said quietly, trying to keep the dignity of the occasion intact. He huffed and sat down, muttering under his breath. The rest of the evening was tense, the air thick with unsaid words and stifled grief. After everyone had left and Sophie had gone to bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The man lying next to me felt like a stranger. His greed, his timing, his utter disregard for what this home represented, it was all too much. The train ride home was quiet on my end, but Tom was as chatty as ever. He kept going on about selling my late mother's house, calculating out loud how much money we might get and what he'd do with it. "We could really turn things around, Joe. Maybe even get that car I'd been eyeing up, take it to Vegas, huh?" he said, grinning like he'd already won the lottery. I just stared at my phone, not really listening to him. But then, a notification popped up, a new video from Tom on social media. Curiosity piqued, I clicked on it. There he was, standing in front of a lavish funeral setup, not my mother's simple service. His face was somber, his voice soft as he talked about losing someone so close, like a second mother. The video was slick, his words rehearsed. Over 1 million views. Comments flooded in, offering condolences and praises for his sensitivity. I felt a cold anger settle in my stomach. So, this was why he'd missed most of Mom's funeral. He was too busy playing the grieving son at a stranger's ceremony across the cemetery to boost his social media image. All through the train ride, Tom babbled on about the house sale and his plans. With that money, Joe, think about it. We could really live it up. That car, it's a beauty, ride smooth. Vegas would be just the start. I kept my eyes on my phone, my face neutral, but inside, I was reeling. He was so wrapped up in his fantasies, he didn't even notice my silence wasn't agreement but disgust. When he finally paused, expecting some enthusiastic response, I just shook my head slowly. "Tom, you're in for a surprise when we get home," I said quietly, my tone flat. He misread my calm for defeat. "That's my girl. Knew you'd come around. It's the smart play, Joe." When the train pulled into our station, Tom was buzzing with excitement, probably imagining himself behind the wheel of a new car. I felt nothing but a resolve so sharp it almost scared me. This was the end of the line, not just for our trip, but for us. As we walked through the doors of our home, Tom was already on his phone, likely bragging about his victory to someone. I let him prattle on as I went to the bedroom, my decision clear in my mind. That evening, after Tom had finally run out of steam and fallen asleep, sprawled on the sofa with dreams of dollar signs dancing in his head, I sat down at the kitchen table with all the paperwork from my mother's will. I drafted an email to a lawyer, detailing everything. I needed advice, yes, but more than that, I needed an ally. Tom's sister, Linda, had always been kind to me, understanding even when Tom was at his worst. It was time to reach out, to tell her everything, and to ask for her help. The next morning was heavy with the weight of impending confrontations. Tom came down for breakfast, unaware of the surprise I had prepared for him. As he entered the kitchen, he froze. His sister Linda was sitting at the dining table, her expression stern and unwavering. From the look on Tom's face, seeing her was the last thing he expected. "What's, Linda? What are you doing here?" Tom stammered, his usual bravado nowhere in sight. Linda didn't waste a moment. "Sit down, Tom. We need to talk," she said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Tom glanced at me before reluctantly sitting down opposite his sister. I remained standing, feeling strangely empowered, with Linda on my side. Linda turned to me, nodding slightly as if to say, "Go ahead." I took a deep breath. "Tom, I told Linda everything, about your spending, your demands to sell my mother's house, and your threats of divorce." Tom's face went pale, his eyes darting between Linda and me. "Joanne, Linda cut him off, her tone icy. "You what, Tom? You've embarrassed yourself enough." I've been listening to Joanne, and frankly, I'm disgusted. She turned her full attention to Tom, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "You haven't grown up at all. You're still acting like a spoiled child. And this house? Did you ever stop to think about what you've actually contributed to it? Nothing. This house belongs to me. I let you live here out of pity." Tom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like he wanted to argue, but knew he stood no chance against the truth. "And there's more," Linda continued, her voice hard as steel. "The alimony for Sophie? I've been the one sending it, Tom. Not you. You couldn't even manage that, could you?" I felt a shockwave go through me. All these years, I thought Tom had at least done his duty by Sophie. I was wrong. Tom looked down, unable to meet either of our eyes. Linda shook her head. "You're not just a failure as a husband and a father. You failed as a man." I felt tears well up, not from sadness, but from the raw, harsh truth Linda was laying bare. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but clear. "Tom, I want the house to go to Sophie. She deserves it, and it's what my mother wanted." At that, Tom shot up from his seat, fury replacing his earlier defeat. "I don't care about Sophie. I want my share. If I don't get it, I want a divorce." After these words, something snapped in me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared, my hand steady now. Here, Tom. You want a divorce? You got it. Sign these. Tom's face went from red to white, his rage deflating like a punctured balloon. You can't do this to me, Joanne. I'll ask for alimony. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. Go ahead. Try. You might find our daughter a tougher opponent in court than me. His hand trembled as he took the pen and signed the papers, each stroke heavy with the weight of his failures. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and left, the door slamming shut behind him. After the dust settled from the divorce, I moved back to the city where I grew up and settled into my mother's house. Now, the house buzzed with the excitement of new beginnings. My daughter, Sophie, after graduating college, had gotten married and was now expecting her first child. She and her husband, Matt, decided to move in with me. One quiet afternoon, as I tended the garden, my phone rang. I wiped my hands on my apron before answering. Seeing Tom's name flash on the screen gave me a moment's pause. Joanne, hey, I need a favor. Tom's voice sounded through the receiver, hesitant and a bit desperate. What kind of favor, Tom? I asked, my tone guarded but polite. It's about money. I've got myself into some trouble with debts, big ones. I was hoping you could help me out, he confessed, his voice strained. I couldn't help but let out a small, incredulous laugh. Tom, I think you've got the wrong idea. I'm not in a position to help you with that. There was a silence, then he chuckled dryly. Well, I had to ask, right? Anyway, how about we give it another shot? Marry me again, Joanne. We could start over. The suggestion was so absurd, I laughed outright. Marry you again? Tom, I'm not about to step on that same rake a third time. No, thank you. His sigh was audible over the phone. Guess I had that coming. All right then, take care, Joanne. Later that week, I was on the phone with Linda, Tom's sister. We kept in touch regularly, a friendship forged through shared trials with her brother. Joanne, you won't believe what Tom tried to pull this time. He attempted to sell my house to cover his debts. Can you imagine? If I hadn't found out just in time, he might have actually gone through with it. Linda's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. I'm just glad you caught him before it was too late, I responded, genuinely relieved for her. Yeah, well, that's the last straw. I've cut him off completely now. No more rescues. He needs to learn, she declared, her tone resolute. We talked a bit more about lighter topics, before saying our goodbyes. Hanging up, I felt a profound sense of peace. Cutting Tom out of my life was the best decision I had ever made. The chaos he brought with him was gone, and in its place was a calm, stable life with my daughter and her growing family. Sophie waddled into the kitchen just as I was putting the kettle on. Who were you talking to, Mom? Linda, I replied, watching her settle herself at the table. She was just telling me about the latest drama with Tom. Sophie shook her head, a smile playing on her lips. I'm glad we're out of that mess. I can't wait for the baby to arrive, to start our own little chapter here. Me too, honey. This house, this family, it's going to be filled with so much love and none of the drama, I said, reaching out to pat her hand. Hi, my name is Emily Roberts, and I'm just your average 28-year-old woman from Chicago. Ever since I was a little kid, I've been obsessed with baking and cooking up delicious treats in the kitchen. It was like therapy for me, measuring, mixing, getting my hands dirty. Watching something go from a bunch of basic ingredients to a mouth-watering pastry or cake was pure magic. After high school, the obvious choice was attending culinary school to become a professional pastry chef. My parents didn't have much money, so I worked my butt off at a diner throughout those years, but it was worth it when I landed my dream job at Delilah's Bakery right after graduating. I started out at minimum wage, working insane hours, but I busted my ass and became one of Delilah's star bakers in just a couple years. It was during one of my bakery shifts that I met Tom Anderson, an account executive for a software company. He came in one morning looking tired as hell. "Mornin' darlin', the usual?" I chirped over the counter. Tom just grunted and slid a $20 across. "Surprise me with something good, sweetheart. Sales been kicking my ass this week." Since Tom looked like he needed a pick-me-up, I hooked him up with an extra-large banana bread loaf, my specialty. On the house, hon, everyone needs a little treat now and then. The guy looked stunned. "Wow, thank you. You're an angel." He tore off a chunk and his eyes rolled back. "Oh my god, this is insane. You made this?" I blushed. Guilty as charged. Just a little banana bread to brighten your day. Well, consider my day bright, beautiful. I'm Tom Anderson. That's how we met, me slinging pastries and him being a regular customer who always left me the nicest compliments. We got to know each other more over the following weeks, flirted shamelessly, and he eventually worked up the nerve to ask me out on a real date. The rest was history. We dated for 2 years before Tom finally proposed. I was over the moon. This guy deeply appreciated my culinary talents and had fallen for the real me. Well, perfect except for one thing. Tom's mother Jane was a nightmare from the first time I met her. She looked me up and down like I was a cockroach when Tom brought me over for Sunday dinner. "Ma, this is my girlfriend Emily. Emily, this is my mom Jane," Tom said, putting his arm around me. Jane's thin lips pursed as she gave me an obvious once-over. "A pastry chef? That's interesting." She said it like she was trying not to gag. "Yes ma'am, I work at Delilah's bakery downtown." "Tom says you've tried my banana bread before?" I tried to be friendly with an outstretched hand. Jane just stared at my hand like it was diseased, before turning up her nose. I didn't realize that was made by the pastry girl at the counter. I just assumed Delilah made everything herself. That was it, the claws came out from this evil old harpy on our very first meeting. I wanted to slap her and storm out, but Tom kept me calm, whispering that his mom was just a little rough and to give her a chance. After getting married, I decided it was time to take my passion for baking to the next level. So I quit and got licensed to operate a home bakery business. "Oh how adorable, you're playing kid chef again." Jane cackled. "I give it 6 months before the oven mitt comes off and reality sets in, sweet cheeks." Tom cut in, putting his hand on my arm. "Lay off her, Ma. Emily's worked her tail off to get here, she's got a real entrepreneurial spirit." "Oh, I'm terrified." Jane threw her hands up mockingly. The great queen of cupcakes is finally branching out from behind that bakery counter cash register. What an inspirational, gutsy career move. My face burned, but I kept my cool. Thank you for that stunning vote of confidence. I appreciate your support as I follow my dreams. But you know what? Spite can be an incredible motivator. So as the months rolled on, I baked and baked my little heart out, taking custom orders through word of mouth and social media. Jane constantly ragged on me about playing make-believe as a baker. But orders and 5-star reviews from clients started rolling in like crazy. I had a true knack for crafting gorgeous custom cakes, cookies, pastries, you name it. Have you seen the latest for Emily's Eats? Tom gushed one night over dinner, scrolling through my Instagram feed. This girl is incredible. Her croissant cereal treats are blowing up. Jane shot me a withering look over her glass of wine. Well, isn't that wonderful, dear? Getting those internet likes must be very validating. Although I'm not quite sure how viable a business based on baked goods photo shoots can really be. Things only got more tense as my home bakery grew. Jane seemingly took personal offense to my hustle and grind as Emily's Eats blew up. Somebody ordered a 2-tier salted caramel cake for a wedding in Lincoln Park this weekend. I excitedly showed Tom the order one evening. This could be my big break to get into the Chicago event space. Jane snorted from the couch. Oh, how wonderful, sweetie. A locally catered cake for a couple of yuppies' nuptials. You'll really make it big with jobs like that. Better yuppie nuptials than nitpicking and nagging all day, like some miserable gossips I know. I fired back, losing my cool. Jane looked ready to swing before Tom stepped in. Alright, that's enough from both of you. Mom, stop crapping on Emily's dream before it even gets off the ground. And you. He shot me a look. Don't let her jabs get you riled up. This is your passion we're talking about. He was right. Every time I got flustered arguing with that wretched woman, I got sloppier in the kitchen. And I couldn't afford any mistakes, not when I was pouring every ounce of energy into making Emily's eats a success. One day, I got a huge order from one of my regular customers, Mrs. Wilkins. She wanted a big fancy cake and like 50 assorted pastries for some corporate shindig at her husband's office. This was a massive deal for my little home bakery business. Listen up, Emily, Mrs. Wilkins said in that no-nonsense tone of hers. This order needs to be absolutely perfect, you hear? We're talking the biggest wigs at my Richards company. If this goes well, you can bet your sweet behind I'll be referring you to all my high society friends. For the next few days, I worked myself to the bone prepping for Mrs. Wilkins' huge order. I wanted to craft a showstopper cake with elegant piped rosettes and handmade gum paste flowers. And the pastries had to be delicious little works of art. The morning I was supposed to deliver everything, I was a bundle of nerves. But I had baked and decorated each item with care, checking them over 1,000,000 times for any imperfections. By 10 a.m., I had it all packaged up and looking like a dream. That's when Jane barged in, ruining my flow. There you are, lazybones. I need you to run to the post office right this minute. She shoved a shipping label in my face. I ordered something special online and it requires a signature. I groaned in frustration. Are you serious? I'm literally about to head out with this massive order I've been working on for days. The only words I should be hearing from you are why yes, Mother Jane, I'll be happy to run your errand right away. Jane waggled her bony finger at me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to Jane's stupid demand just to get her out of my face. She gave me a sickly sweet smile as I grabbed my purse. Wonderful, that's a good girl. Now hurry along and I'll make sure your little baked nothings get delivered safely while you're out. Something about her tone raised red flags, but I was too frazzled to think much of it. I figured Jane was just being her usual awful self, condescending my business as always. When I got home, Jane said with a grin she had given the cakes and pastries to the courier. 2 days later, I got a call from the furious client, Mr. Wilkins himself. What in the goddamn hell were those inedible monstrosities you tried to pass off as pastries, Emily? He shouted so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Sir, I don't understand. This has to be some mistake. I was openly weeping at this point, all my hard work and biggest chance at success crumbling around me. I followed all the instructions to a T, perfectly tempering the chocolate, using fresh ingredients. Please let me make this right. You're damn right you'll be making this right by refunding me every cent and removing any association with my company from your cheap little website and socials. With that, he hung up, leaving me a sobbing, hysterical mess on the kitchen floor. Over the next few months, my budding home bakery business completely withered and died thanks to the horrific reviews from the Wilkins disaster. Jane, meanwhile, watched the fallout with glee. Well, isn't this just a shame? She crooned one evening as I sat despondently scrolling through the scathing online comments about my former business. Although I can't say I'm terribly surprised. I warned you not to get your hopes up too high with this cute little baking fantasy. Baking had always been my biggest passion, and having it ruthlessly mocked by Jane made the failure that much more devastating. For a while, I just stopped getting in the kitchen altogether. Come on, babe, you can't let that witch get you down like this, Tom pleaded one night as I laid on the couch, staring off blankly. Baking is your calling, don't let my mom's nasty comments make you give up on your dream. His pep talk actually gave me an idea. Maybe I could start doing baking tutorials and tips videos online to remind people how skilled I was. I spent the next few months throwing myself into cultivating an audience on Instagram, YouTube, you name it. I filmed step-by-step guides to my favorite recipes, shared baking hacks I'd learned over the years, and did calming videos just doing things like piping frosting decorations. To my surprise, people actually started tuning in and engaging with my content in a big way. Eventually, my follower counts on the various platforms started growing exponentially. "Damn it, Emily," Tom beamed one night, looking at my YouTube stats. "You just hit 100,000 subscribers. That's insane." Just then, Jane came shuffling into the room, wrinkling her nose at Tom and I smiling over my laptop. "What's got you two grinning like idiots?" Jane snapped. "Don't tell me your baked goods cart finally made it onto the evening news." I rolled my eyes. "If you must know, my baking tutorial videos online are getting wildly popular. I just hit over 100,000 subscribers." Jane's face instantly soured into a frown. "Is that so? How delightful." The sarcasm dripped from her voice. "Wasting all your time baking again for strangers on the internet to gawk at, I see." "It's not just wasting time, Jane," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I've built a real following of people who appreciate my skills and knowledge. This whole thing could lead to amazing opportunities down the road." "Oh, like what?" Jane scoffed. "Getting your own public access television show? Maybe a baking blog no one reads? Shall I start setting aside money for your future unemployment now or later?" I fought the urge to cry as Jane laughed coldly, clearly threatened by my small restart towards pursuing my passion again. No matter how much I accomplished, she always found words that hit me hard. One day, I bumped into an old friend, Jenna, who I went to culinary school with years ago. She looked just as bright and bubbly as always. "Well, I'll be darned if it isn't Emily Roberts," Jenna gushed, pulling me into a big hug. "Girl, it's been ages. How the heck are you?" "Jenna, hey. Wow, yeah, it really has been too long," I said, returning her warm embrace. "I'm doing okay, you know, keeping busy with my at-home baking business and all." Jenna's eyes went wide with recognition. "No way, you're Emily's Eats? The baking blog with all those gorgeous dessert tutorials that's blown up lately?" I gave an embarrassed shrug. "Huh, yeah, that's me. I do love baking up a storm for my little online audience." Speaking of which, Jenna adopted a more pensive look. "Emily, you've got to come be a guest on my cooking show. We've got a slot open for a baking demo in next week's episode." I tried to mask my giddiness, shuffling my feet coyly. "Well gosh, if you really think making a cameo could help grow my brand, then I'd be honored." We exchanged contacts so Jenna's crew could send over the show deets. As I headed home, my head was still spinning at this shocking stroke of good luck. Me, baking live on TV? Could this opportunity get any more perfect to rehab my reputation after the Wilkins fiasco? When I filled Tom in over dinner, he matched my level of excitement. "Damn it, that's insane. My girl, baking it up on live TV, talk about the ultimate comeback." I swatted him playfully. "Oh stop, I'm sure it won't be that big a deal. Just a little guest spot to get some extra exposure, nothing crazy." But of course, Jane had to come sweeping in with her signature negativity to burst my bubble. "What's all this nonsense I hear about you being on the television, baking like a circus monkey for housewives to gawk at?" I rolled my eyes. "Jane, must you always diminish everything positive in my life? This is a huge opportunity for great exposure for my home baking business." Jane simply tittered mockingly before turning businesslike. Yes, that's all well and good. Now about getting me and Tom audience tickets." My eyes boggled. "I'm sorry, what? You want tickets to come watch the taping?" "Well, of course," Jane said in a tone like she was explaining something to a small child. "I've been dying for a chance to appear on television myself for ages, even if just as an extra in the crowd." After some browbeating, I eventually gave in to Jane's insufferable demands and called up Jenna to ask for a couple of audience passes, figuring it would be easier than dealing with the old hag's tantrum over being denied. "Thanks so much for this. My whole crew is stoked to have you," Jenna gushed when I arrived at the studio the day of taping. She ushered me over to the kitchen set area, where high-definition cameras were set up around the blazing hot lights of the instructional cooking station. When we go live in 3 hours, you'll be baking up your famous salted caramel apple pie and a platter of those drool-worthy lemon cupcakes you always post. While I got glammed up for my big television debut, Jane and Tom got seated in the front row of the studio audience, per Jane's insistent demands. Part of me was relieved to have their familiar faces there to lean on. The other part knew Jane would find some way to undermine or sabotage me yet again out of her usual jealousy and resentment. After that, I headed into the kitchen area to do some practice runs for my baking demo. I wanted to get the motions and plating down perfectly before going live. The pies and cupcakes I prepped looked downright mouth-watering, hopefully a good sign. After one last check of each dish, the director announced a brief break before going live. I took the opportunity to use the restroom and gather my nerves before the big moment. But when I got back to the kitchen set, Jenna was waiting with a concerned look on her face. "Hey, sorry to bug you before we go live, but you'll never believe this. Our stage manager noticed your mother-in-law snooping around your workspace a few minutes ago." A wave of dread and panic washed over me as I rushed to examine the workspace. Jenna was right, some of my prepped ingredients had clearly been moved around. I couldn't believe Jane would stoop this low, sabotaging my big television debut by deliberately replacing my ingredients. Hot, angry tears sprang to my eyes as Jenna pulled me into a comforting hug. "Hey, it's okay, we'll just get you fresh ingredients, no sweat," she murmured softly, stroking my back. "Everything's gonna be fine, I promise." Jenna quickly summoned a production assistant to race out and purchase all new baking supplies from a nearby store while I tried to collect myself. I could feel Jane's smug leer burning into the back of my head from her front row audience seat. When the new, untainted ingredients finally arrived, it was time to go live. I took a few deep, calming breaths and stepped up to the cooking area, my face set in grim determination. As I got to work whipping up the salted caramel apple pie and lemon cupcake batters, I made sure to narrate each step for the viewers at home. Jenna chimed in occasionally with encouraging words about my impeccable technique. "Just look at Emily's precise piping work on those cupcake swirls, folks. TV perfect if I've ever seen it." After what felt like no time at all, it was the big moment. Jenna welcomed a panel of audience members up to sample my creations live on air. I felt my heart pounding as the first taste tester, a middle-aged woman, politely took a bite of the salted caramel apple pie. I searched her face for any hint of reaction, positive or negative. The woman's eyes suddenly went wide, seemingly in surprise. "Oh my, this is just heavenly!" she exclaimed once she finally swallowed the bite. That perfect crumbly yet flaky crust, the zing of the salted caramel, good lord, it's like a flavor explosion. A giddy smile broke out across my face as the other samplers voiced similar oohs and ahs of delight at each bite. Jenna shot me a big wink and double thumbs up, clearly ecstatic her secret weapon baking guest was knocking it out of the park. I snuck a peek at Jane out in the front row, absolutely seething with her arms crossed tightly. Good, let that wretched, bitter old crone sit and stew for once, watching my success happen right in front of her hateful eyes. As the polite clapping died down, Jenna took center stage with a devilish grin. "Well folks, I think we can all agree Emily's baking is, indeed, out of this world incredible. But, what if I told you our miraculous pastry wizard overcame a last-minute act of sabotage just to dazzle us here today?" The audience let out a collective murmur of confusion. A large screen behind Jenna and I flickered to life, displaying security cam footage from earlier that morning. We watched in silence as Jane's hunched figure snuck up to my prepped workstation, looked around furtively, then proceeded to open various containers and jars, seemingly tampering with their contents. The video cut out as a deafening hush fell over the studio audience. Everyone instinctively turned to gawk at Jane sitting frozen in her front row. Finally, the silence was broken by Tom, my sweet, supportive husband, suddenly standing up and bellowing at the top of his lungs. "Enough, mother! How dare you try sabotaging Emily's big break out of your own pathetic jealousy? I'm so sorry, baby." Tom turned to me with tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry. I never saw her toxic, abusive behavior for what it was sooner. You never deserved any of her gaslighting, manipulative behavior. The cameras panned over to Jane, absolutely pallid and shrinking into her seat in horror, as Jenna offered her the microphone and asked if she'd care to explain her sabotaging actions. For a moment, Jane just sat there frozen, silently opening and closing her mouth. But when she finally did speak, it was with a scathing venom. "You smug, ungrateful little thing." She spat out the insult directly at me, causing the audience to gasp in shock. "You think your cute little baking hobby makes you so special, huh? That this is the big break that finally earns you some undeserved self-respect?" Jane let out a high, deranged cackle. "Well, I've got a wake-up call for you, Missy. It was me who ruined that all-important catered lunch that destroyed your pathetic business. Me. From the very start, all I'd dreamed of was destroying you, your disgusting baking career, your undeserved relationship with my son, everything." Seeing Jane unravel completely into her true, unfiltered toxic self was bone-chilling. She turned her furious glare directly into the camera lens, screaming with heightened mania. "I won't let this nothing, this lazy, slovenly chef wannabe, tarnish the honor of being married into the Anderson family name any longer with her sham baking act. You hear me, Emily? I'll destroy you if it's the last thing I dash." Suddenly, Jane's hate-filled tirade was cut short by a loud thud, as Tom had charged from his seat and full-on knocked the microphone out of her hands, leaving the audiences shrieking in shock. Thereafter, Tom pulled me into a loving embrace as the audience roared their approval. I buried my face in his chest, alternating between sobs of joy and disbelief at how everything had unfolded. That TV appearance was a total game-changer for my life and career. Turns out, people just can't get enough of baking drama mixed with unhinged family meltdowns. Jenna's baking show scored its highest ratings ever from all the insanity that went down. TV bloggers and reviewers raved about what an unscripted television milestone it was. Clips from the episode, particularly Jane's deranged rant where she admitted sabotaging me, went viral almost instantly. Overnight, I became known as the long-suffering baking blogger who finally stood up to her evil mother-in-law from hell. It was honestly overwhelming, my little online baking tips channel getting that much mainstream exposure. Dude, this is nuts. I've already gained like 200,000 new YouTube subscribers just from that TV fiasco. I showed Tom the numbers a few days later, still in disbelief. Brands started hitting me up about sponsorship opportunities. Television talent scouts DM'd about potentially hosting my own show someday. It was a wildly surreal experience being lifted up in the aftermath of what had been one of the most traumatizing, horrific days of my life. Is this really happening? I marveled aloud while reading a lucrative sponsorship offer out loud to Tom one night over glasses of celebratory wine. Am I actually a full-on celebrity baker now? Tom grinned and clinked my glass. You're damn right, baby. And you earned every ounce of it with your crazy talent and mental toughness to endure all this from you-know-who for so long. I felt myself blush at the high praise. Looking back, maybe all that torment had been a blessing in disguise. The thing that truly compelled me to hone my craft with laser focus, while simultaneously developing the thick skin needed to endure hurtful critics and naysayers. Jane had been the ultimate naysayer, and I had still managed to make my baking dream a success in spite of her. As for Jane herself, let's just say between the public humiliation of having her abusive behavior exposed so rawly, and Tom completely cutting her out of our lives, she ended up retreating back to whatever sad little hell dimension she crawled out of. Without so much as a text or call from her, we quietly packed up and moved out of the home to completely cut ties. We found a beautiful new place we could truly make our own, splurging on upgrades here and there thanks to my booming influencer income. Let me set the stage. I'm Elise, 33, translator for a big shot company that keeps me on my toes with languages I barely knew existed until they handed me the dictionary. My life's not your typical fairy tale, it's more a series of plot twists. I married straight out of college, thinking I'd nailed life. But fast forward a few years, the marriage tanked, big surprise, right? But it gave me the best thing ever, my daughter Lily, a spitfire at 8, who has more wit in her pinky than most do in their entire head. Then, there's David, my current flame, or as I like to call him, Mr. Right the second time around. We bumped into each other at a dusty old book club. He was arguing about Hemingway's love of brevity, and I was all in for Fitzgerald's flair. Sparks flew over worn pages and tepid coffee. That was the start of endless debates and coffee dates. A year down the road, David popped the question at the same dingy coffee shop, with a ring as understated as our meeting. "Elise, will you?" He had started, all nervous, which wasn't his usual confident self. "Make your coffee every morning? Only if you promise to pick up your socks," I quipped, before slipping in a serious, "Yes, I will." But, as luck would have it, not everyone was popping champagne and tossing confetti. Enter Mrs. Thompson, David's mother, a tough nut with a stare that could curdle milk. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down like I was a sofa she regretted buying. "So, you're the one David can't stop yapping about," she had said, her voice sharp as a knife. "Guilty as charged. And you must be the famous Mrs. Thompson. David says you make the best cherry pie in town." From that day on, every visit was a chess game. She'd check my moves, always ready to declare a checkmate. But David was a gem. He'd squeeze my hand under the table, his way of saying, "Ignore her, I'm right here." One day, lounging on our rickety deck while David flipped burgers on the grill, he'd brought it up. "Mom's a bit old school, Elise. She's all about family legacy and that jazz. Yeah, and she's got it in her head that I'm done having kids. Thinks Lily's it and worries about the precious family line." I'd replied, the frustration bubbling up. David had put down the tongs, his face serious for once. I know. She's worried you won't want more kids. But whatever we decide, it's our business, not hers." Despite the gloom cast by David's mom, our wedding day was everything I'd hoped it would be, modest, but filled with joy. My daughter Lily was dolled up in a cute pink dress, practically floating around the venue, her laughter a melody that softened even the sternest hearts. Everyone we loved was there, smiling and cheering, except for one. Mrs. Thompson sat through the entire event with a face like she'd sucked on a lemon. She didn't even get up to congratulate us. Living with David, it felt like we'd hit the jackpot: warm, cozy evenings, and the constant buzz of a happy, albeit small, family. But as much as our home was filled with love, there was always an undercurrent of tension, thanks to one persistent storm cloud, Mrs. Thompson. One Saturday morning, while David was out running errands, Mrs. Thompson decided it was a good time to drop by unannounced. The doorbell rang just as Lily and I were in the middle of a heated Uno match. "Grams!" Lily shouted, dropping her cards and racing to the door. I followed more slowly, steeling myself. "Mrs. Thompson, what a surprise," I said, my voice polite but cool. She brushed past me without a greeting, her eyes sweeping the room like she was the health inspector and we were a restaurant on the brink of being shut down. "I was just in the neighborhood," she said, though we both knew she lived on the other side of town. "Thought I'd see what you all were up to without David around to supervise." As I headed to the kitchen, I heard her start in on Lily. "So, young lady, has your mother been keeping you busy, or are you just lazing around the house all day?" "We were playing Uno, and I was winning," Lily responded with a confidence I wished I could muster. "That's no real skill, is it? Why don't you read something more stimulating?" I returned with her tea, placing it on the coaster with a little more force than necessary. "Lily's top of her class, Mrs. Thompson. Uno's just for fun." Mrs. Thompson sipped her tea, making a face. "Well, as long as she's not falling behind. David tells me you're managing well enough, but I have to see it for myself. And making sure he's not burdened with more than he can handle is part of that." I sat down across from her, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "David isn't burdened. He's thrilled. We all are. This is our family now." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Well, I'll let David know my thoughts. He deserves to hear it from his mother." As she walked to the door, I followed, my voice firmer now. David hears everything from me, Mrs. Thompson. We don't keep secrets or run reports to parents. We're adults, building a life together. She paused at the door, her back to me. Just remember, Elise. I'm his mother. My approval might not mean much to you, but it means a lot to him. Trying to get along with Mrs. Thompson was like trying to smooth a crumpled paper. No matter how hard you try, the lines are always there. But for David's sake, I kept at it. One evening, I decided to host a dinner. Nothing fancy, just a casual thing to maybe melt some of that ice. I'm making your mom's favorite tonight, cherry pie. Think it'll win her over? I asked David as he helped me set the table. David chuckled, straightening a fork. Mom's tough, but nobody can resist her cherry pie. Just take it easy, yeah? She can be, a lot. The plan was simple. Dinner at 6, pie for dessert, and hopefully some kind of truce by the end of the night. But as luck would have it, just as I pulled the pie out of the oven, looking golden and perfect, Lily's school called. Mom, it's Ms. Carson. She says I left my project at school, and it's due tomorrow. Lily's face was a mix of panic and hope. Okay, we'll go get it. Can't have all your hard work go to waste, I said, glancing at the clock. Mrs. Thompson would be here any minute. I scribbled a quick note for her, just in case we missed each other. Back in 8. Make yourself at home. We rushed to the school and back, making it in just under 20 minutes. When we walked in, Mrs. Thompson was seated at the table, looking like she owned the place. David was pouring her a glass of wine. Dinner went by with the usual small talk. How's work, how's school, the weather, safe topics that kept the night from turning into a minefield. Then came the pie. I served everyone a generous slice, smiling a bit too eagerly. Hope it's as good as you remember, Mrs. Thompson. We all took a bite, and immediately, Lily's face scrunched up. Ugh, Mom, this tastes weird. Confused, I took a bite myself. My mouth was assaulted by a blast of salt and sour, a far cry from what I'd prepared. I looked up at Mrs. Thompson, who was watching me with a smug look. This doesn't taste right, Elise. Did you follow the recipe properly? She asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Of course, I made it just like I started, but then it hit me. She had been alone in the house. My eyes narrowed. David, noticing the tension, jumped in. Maybe it's just a bad batch of cherries? Let's not sweat it. How about we order some pizza instead? Sounds great, I managed to say, my eyes still fixed on Mrs. Thompson. After David went to order the pizza, Mrs. Thompson leaned in close and whispered, maybe next time you'll think twice before leaving me alone in your kitchen. I was stunned. She had actually sabotaged the pie. I kept my cool, though. Is this how you want to play it? Just making sure you know where you stand, she hissed back. The rest of the evening was a blur. Pizza came, we ate, and Mrs. Thompson left soon after, not a word about the pie. David seemed oblivious, happy even that we'd managed to salvage the night with takeout. Life after the pie incident felt like walking on eggshells, especially whenever Mrs. Thompson was around. But David, bless his heart, thought a change of scenery might do us some good. So, out of the blue, he comes home one evening, all smiles, waving a set of plane tickets like he's won the lottery. Guess what, Elise? We're going on vacation. And not just any vacation, India, he announced, practically bouncing on his heels. India? Seriously? I couldn't hide my surprise. India had been on my bucket list for as long as I could remember. But what about, your mom? David's face fell a bit, then he shrugged. Well, she's coming too. Thought it'd be good for all of us to spend some quality time together, bond a bit. I sighed, already dreading the drama, but not wanting to burst his bubble. Alright, if you think it's a good idea. When do we leave? In 2 weeks. I got it all planned out. We'll see the Taj Mahal, ride elephants, the whole 9 yards. His enthusiasm was infectious, and despite my reservations, I found myself getting excited about the trip. The weeks leading up to the trip were a whirlwind of planning and packing. Lists, shopping, more lists. The night before we were set to leave, David and I sat down with a map and a guidebook, marking out all the spots we wanted to visit. "You really think your mom is going to ride an elephant?" I joked, trying to keep the mood light. David laughed. "I'd pay good money to see that." The day of the departure was chaotic. Bags everywhere, Lily running around in excitement, and Mrs. Thompson, well, she was her usual self, complaining about everything from the weight of her luggage to the timing of the flight. "Why does it have to be so early? And why India? It's so far and exotic," she grumbled as we loaded up the car. "Mom, come on, it's an adventure. Elise has always wanted to see India. We're going to have a great time," David tried to reassure her, giving me a wink. At the airport, Mrs. Thompson's mood hadn't improved. She fussed over her boarding pass, her seating arrangement, the lack of her preferred magazine at the airport shop. On the plane, Mrs. Thompson ended up seated separately from us, much to everyone's relief. She had managed to argue her way into an aisle seat closer to the front, away from our block of 3. As we soared above the clouds, heading towards an unknown experience, I couldn't help but wonder if this trip would bring us closer together or drive a deeper wedge. But ready or not, India awaited, and with it, a journey that was sure to be unforgettable. India was nothing short of an eye-opener: colors, chaos, and smells that could knock you sideways if you weren't careful. We'd been having the time of our lives, except, of course, for Mrs. Thompson, who found something to complain about at every turn. Still, David, Lily, and I were making the most of it, soaking up every experience. After a long day of sightseeing, we were back at the hotel, exhausted but happy. I was unpacking some of our stuff when I noticed Lily looking guilty, fidgeting next to her suitcase. "What's up, Bug? You look like you're sitting on a secret," I nudged her gently. She bit her lip, then pulled out a package from her bag. "Mom, look. Grandma gave this to me at the airport and told me to keep it a secret. She said it was a snack for when I get hungry." My heart sank as I saw the package. It was bacon. "Lily, sweetheart, you know we can't bring meat into the country like this, right? It's against the law here." Lily's eyes widened, teary. "I didn't know, Mom. Grandma said it was okay." Just then, David walked in. "What's going on here?" he asked, seeing the upset looks. I handed him the package, my voice tense. "Your mom snuck this into Lily's bag. It's bacon, David." "What? No, she wouldn't." His voice trailed off as he looked from the bacon to Lily's upset face. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do anything bad," Lily cried out. David knelt down and hugged her. "It's not your fault, honey. You didn't know." He looked up at me, worry creasing his forehead. "Elise, what are we going to do? First, we get rid of this properly. Then, we need to have a serious talk with your mother," I said, more annoyed than ever. David nodded, still shocked but supportive. "Yeah, okay. Let's handle this." We managed to dispose of the bacon without any issues, thankfully. But the mood was set for a confrontation. We found Mrs. Thompson in the hotel lounge, sipping tea as if she hadn't a care in the world. "Mom, can we talk?" David's tone was firm as he approached her, a sign he meant business. Mrs. Thompson looked up, her expression wary. "What is it now, David? Can't you see I'm trying to relax?" David didn't waste any time. "Why did you give Lily bacon to bring here? You know that's illegal. It could have gotten us in serious trouble." Mrs. Thompson scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, it was just a few slices. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." "It's not about the quantity, Mom. It's about following the law." "And putting Lily in that position? Really?" David's frustration was palpable. I stepped in, unable to hold back. "Mrs. Thompson, what were you thinking? Putting your granddaughter in such a risky situation, just for what? A snack?" She bristled, defensive. I was thinking of my granddaughter, unlike you, who drags her halfway across the world to places like this. That's enough, Mom. You're not making any sense, and what you did was wrong. Plain and simple, David cut her off. The conversation went around in circles for a while, with Mrs. Thompson refusing to see reason. But David stood his ground, and I couldn't have been prouder. Later that night, in our room, David apologized for his mother's behavior again. I'm sorry, Elise. I never thought she'd go this far. It's not your fault, David. But we need to be more careful with her. Who knows what else she might pull, I said, the day's events weighing heavily on my mind. David nodded, pulling me close. We'll handle it, together. No more secrets, no more sneaking around. We're a team, right? Right, I agreed, feeling a bit better knowing we were in this together. Still, as I watched Lily sleep peacefully, unaware of the storm her grandmother had almost caused, I knew this trip was going to be more than just a vacation. It was a test of our family's resilience. Our trip to India turned out to be way better than I feared. We saw incredible places, and even Mrs. Thompson kept her cool, which made me think maybe I had been too harsh on her. By the end of our trip, I was almost relaxed about her being around us. Maybe, just maybe, we could all get along after all. The day we were to head back, everything seemed smooth. We were at the airport, luggage in tow, checking off the last items from our travel list. That's when Lily tugged at my sleeve, her face scrunched up a bit. Mom, I need to go to the bathroom, she whispered. Sure, sweetie. Let's go, I replied, turning to Mrs. Thompson. Could you hold my bag for a minute? She smiled, a bit too sweetly. Of course, dear. Handing over my bag, I led Lily to the restroom, thinking nothing of it. When we came back, Mrs. Thompson was standing there, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips as she handed back my bag. Thanks, I muttered, but something about her expression set off alarms in my head. I didn't dwell on it, just handed the bag to David. Here, can you take this through? My hands are full. Sure thing, he said, slinging it over his shoulder as we headed to the security checkpoint. Lily and I passed through first, easy and clear. I waited on the other side, watching as David placed the bag on the conveyor belt. That's when everything went sideways. The security officers at the monitor started whispering urgently, pointing at the screen before motioning David aside. 2 more officers approached, their faces stern. What's going on? I called out, stepping closer, but a security officer held up a hand to stop me. Ma'am, please wait here, he said. Panic clawed at my chest as I watched them talk to David, his face growing paler by the second. Then, without warning, they escorted him to a small room off to the side. Mrs. Thompson rushed over and grabbed my arm, her earlier smugness replaced by concern. Elise, what's happening? Why are they taking David? I pulled my arm away, keeping my voice steady, despite the chaos. I gave him my bag to carry through the scanner. They found something in it, something that shouldn't have been there. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw fear flicker across her face. Without another word, she tried to follow the officers who took David, but the customs officials stopped her. That's when she lost it, her composure cracking like thin ice underfoot. It was me. I did it. I put those things in her bag, she shouted, trying to push past the officers. The officers, now alert to a deeper issue, brought her back to where I was standing. They started asking rapid-fire questions. It was then that Mrs. Thompson broke down completely, crying and shaking as she confessed. While Elise was with her daughter, I put the money and medicines in her bag, she sobbed, her voice echoing in the busy airport. I wanted her to get caught, to be held back here while we went home. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was one thing to suspect your mother-in-law didn't like you, but another to hear her admit to framing you. The customs officers took us all aside to sort through this mess. As we stood there, with officers buzzing around, taking notes, Mrs. Thompson turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Elise, I'm so sorry. I just thought. I thought if you were out of the picture, David would come back, that he'd realize his mistake. But I was wrong, so wrong. Please, can you forgive me? I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. You didn't just make a mistake. You almost ruined our lives. The officers had listened to everything, and after confirming the story with the surveillance footage, they decided to release David. He came back to us, his face a mask of shock and relief. When he saw his mother in handcuffs, something inside him seemed to break. Mom, how could you? His voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise around us like a knife. I wanted to protect you, Mrs. Thompson cried, trying to reach out to him. The police took Mrs. Thompson away to process her for the crimes she admitted to, leaving us in a bubble of stunned silence. As we headed to the gate to catch our rescheduled flight, I leaned on David, the events of the day replaying in my mind. His mother's actions were unforgivable, and as we walked, a plan began to form on how we would move forward, how we would rebuild the trust and safety that had been so severely shattered. Back home, the silence of our living room felt like a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of the airport police station. David and I sat with cups of tea that had long gone cold, the events of the past few days settling around us like dust after a storm. David broke the silence first, his voice low and weary. I can't believe she'd go that far, Elise. I'm sorry you had to go through all that because of her. I looked over at him, seeing the strain in his eyes. It's not your fault, David. But we do need to think about how we move forward from here. We can't let this slide. Yeah, I know. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The lawyer mentioned a restraining order might be necessary. Given everything, I think he might be right. It was a tough pill to swallow, the idea of legally barring his mother from our lives, but it was a measure of the severity of her actions. It would give us peace of mind, at least. She needs to understand the consequences of her actions, legally and personally. David nodded, rubbing his face with his hands. Yeah, I'll call him tomorrow. Get it started. It's just hard, you know? She's my mom. I reached out, taking his hand. I know she is. And this doesn't mean you don't love her. But we have to protect our family, David. We have to protect Lily. A few days later, the restraining order was in place. It was a surreal feeling, knowing that it had come to this. When David told Lily, he did it in a way that was gentle, but honest. Grandma made some very bad choices, and for now, we need to make sure we're all safe, he explained to her. Lily nodded, her understanding far beyond her years. Is Grandma going to be okay? She asked, her small voice full of concern. We hope so, sweetheart. We hope she gets the help she needs, I added, pulling her into a hug. Life started to settle into a new kind of normal. The days passed with fewer worries about unexpected disruptions, and slowly, the tension began to ease from our shoulders. Mrs. Thompson had spent 2 months in a local prison and was then deported back to the United States. The image of her, desperate and broken, was stark, but it was her actions, not mine, that led us here. Days passed, and the ripple effects of Mrs. Thompson's actions were felt throughout our wider circle of family and friends. People who had once been fixtures in our lives began distancing themselves from her. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was profound, affecting everyone connected to us. She lived alone now, isolated by her own deeds. It was a harsh reality, but a self-inflicted one. One evening, as we sat watching a movie together, wrapped in blankets and sharing a bowl of popcorn, David paused the movie and looked over at me. Elise, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. And I just want to say thank you. For being so strong, for being the rock for this family. I smiled, leaning into him. I do it for us, for all of us. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you stand by them. As we resumed the movie, I looked over at Lily, her eyes heavy with sleep, safe in the knowledge that she was loved and protected. Reflecting on everything, I realized that family isn't just about the good times. It's about who stands with you during the trials, who holds your hand when the path gets rocky. My name is Anna, and this is the story of how I came to be the person I am today. I guess it all started with the family I was born into. My dad, Michael, was a mechanic with big dreams for his car repair shops, and my mom, Sarah, well, she was mostly just along for the ride. From the day I was born, it was pretty clear that my dad wanted a boy. I remember hearing stories from my Aunt Emily about how Dad's face fell when he first held me. Not exactly the warm welcome you'd expect for a newborn. I wanted a son, Sarah. You know that, I overheard him grumbling one evening. My mom, always trying to smooth things over, would just nod and try to change the subject. But she's healthy, Michael, isn't that what matters, she'd say. When I was 5, my little brother Lucas was born. That was the day I saw my dad smile, a smile that reached his eyes, a rarity in those days. He was over the moon, passing out cigars to anyone who would take one. Finally, a real heir to carry on the business, he boasted to his friends at the shop. Life at home shifted dramatically with Lucas's arrival. All of a sudden, it was like I became invisible. My dad spent his days off teaching Lucas about tools and engines, even before the kid could walk properly. Meanwhile, I was pretty much left to my own devices. If it weren't for my grandparents and Aunt Emily, I don't know how I would have coped. They lived just a few houses down, and I was at their place more than I was at my own. Aunt Emily was another lifesaver. She didn't have kids of her own and seemed to get that life at my house wasn't exactly peachy. We'd spend afternoons at the park, and she'd listen to me ramble about school or whatever book I was reading. You know, kiddo, you're smarter than you think, she'd tell me as we walked home from the park. Don't let anyone, not even your dad, make you feel like you're second best. I clung to those words, especially on days when the difference in how my parents treated Lucas and me was blindingly obvious. Like that one time when my dad came home with a brand new bike for Lucas. I remember standing there, hoping maybe there was one for me too. Why would you need a bike, Anna? It's not like you go out much, Dad said with a shrug when he saw me eyeing the bike. I ran out of the house, tears stinging my eyes, straight to my grandma's. She was in her garden, as usual, and without a word, she opened her arms wide, and I buried my face in her apron. Let them talk, Anna. You're going to outshine them all one day, you'll see, she whispered as she stroked my hair. One chilly morning in October, right after my 10th birthday, my grandparents decided to surprise me with something special, a cell phone. It wasn't anything fancy, just one of those basic models that could make calls and send texts, but to me, it might as well have been a diamond. We were in their cozy kitchen, the smell of freshly baked cinnamon rolls still lingering in the air. Grandma handed me a small, wrapped box with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. Go on then, Anna, open it up. It's high time you had one of these. As I tore off the wrapping paper and saw what it was, my eyes must have been as big as saucers. Really? For me? I squeaked, hardly believing it. Of course, for you. Grandpa chuckled, his voice booming warmly. Every young lady needs to stay connected these days. I spent the next few hours fiddling with the phone, setting it up with Grandma's help, and saving their numbers as my first contacts. But my excitement was short-lived. The next day, I made the mistake of taking my new phone home. I was in the living room, showing it off to Aunt Emily, who had dropped by, when Dad walked in from work. What's that you've got there? His tone was more curious than kind, his eyebrows knitting together as he peered at the phone in my hands. It's my new phone. Grandma and Grandpa gave it to me, I said, a bit too eagerly. Dad's face hardened in an instant, and he reached out, snatching the phone from my grasp. This is too much for a kid your age. Lucas needs this more than you do. But, I started to protest, but Aunt Emily put a hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze, a silent signal not to argue. Lucas, who had been playing with his toy cars on the floor, looked up, clueless but interested in the sudden tension. Dad wasted no time, he shoved the phone into Lucas's hands. Here, son, you can have this. Learn to take good care of it. I felt a surge of anger and injustice boiling inside me, but before I could say another word, Aunt Emily steered me out of the room. Let's go for a walk, Anna. Cool down a bit, huh? Outside, Aunt Emily let out a long sigh. Your dad can be a real jerk sometimes, you know? But we've got your back. I don't get it, Emily. Why does he always do this? Why am I always the one who has to give up everything? My voice cracked, the hurt too raw to hide. Aunt Emily stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious. Listen, kid, life's not fair, especially not in your house. But remember, you're not alone. Let me talk to your grandparents. We'll sort this out. True to her word, Aunt Emily and my grandparents confronted Dad the following day. They didn't let up, arguing in hushed, tense tones in the dining room while I pretended not to listen from the stairs. Grandpa's voice was firm, a rare sternness to it. Michael, you had no right to take that phone from Anna. It was our gift to her, not yours to reassign to Lucas. Dad scoffed, dismissive as ever. Oh, come off it, Dad. It's just a phone. And Lucas is the one who needs it more. It's not about the phone, Mike. It's about respecting Anna and our choice to give her something. Grandma chimed in, her voice sharp with frustration. In the end, Dad grudgingly handed the phone back to me, his eyes avoiding mine. Here, take it. Just don't expect any more favors. Life has a way of throwing you curveballs, and mine came crashing down the autumn I turned 11. It was a day like any other. I was walking home from school, crunching the fallen leaves under my sneakers, when I noticed something off. The front door was open, and there were more cars parked outside our house than usual. As I walked in, the atmosphere hit me like a brick. My Aunt Emily was there, tears streaming down her face, while my parents stood off to the side, looking more annoyed than concerned. What's going on? I asked, dropping my school bag by the door. Anna, it's your grandparents, there's been an accident, Aunt Emily managed to say through sobs. A train accident, terrible thing, my dad added flatly, as if he was talking about a delayed delivery at his shop. The news shattered me. My grandparents weren't just family, they were my lifeline, the ones who made sure I felt loved when my own parents couldn't bother. Losing them felt like losing my entire world. The funeral was the hardest day. I remember standing there, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, listening to the murmurs of how tragic it was, how good they were, how unfair life could be. After the funeral, things moved quickly. My dad wasted no time. Emily, you need to clear out from their house. We're selling it. Need to cash in on the estate and settle things quickly, he said as we sat in the living room, still surrounded by condolence flowers. Aunt Emily, still raw from grief, looked at him like he was a stranger. Michael, can you hear yourself? Mom and Dad haven't even been gone a week, and you're already talking about money? Life goes on, Emily. We can't sit around and mope. There's a lot at stake. My mom chimed in, her voice cold and detached. That night, Aunt Emily packed up her things and moved into a small apartment just a few blocks from our house. She asked me to help her, probably to give me a break from the oppressive atmosphere at home. As we packed up her belongings, our conversation drifted to what was to come. Why are they so cold? How can they not care? I asked, frustration and sadness mingling in my voice. Some people just show their true colors at times like this, kiddo. But remember, you've got me. No matter what, I'm here, she assured me, pulling me into a hug. The loss of my grandparents was more than just an emotional blow, it changed my entire life setup. Suddenly, I was more of a maid than a daughter at home, cleaning and cooking because my mom decided it was time I learned to pull my weight. Aunt Emily's apartment became my refuge. It wasn't much, just a couple of small rooms, but it was filled with love and understanding, a stark contrast to the increasing coldness at my parents' house. I was still reeling from everything that had happened after losing my grandparents when life decided to throw me yet another curveball. It was a typical Friday afternoon. I had just come home from school, expecting to find the usual empty house until my parents and brother got back. But today, even the emptiness felt different. Everything was too quiet, too still. I walked up to the front door and found it locked. My heart started pounding as I realized something was off. I rang the doorbell a few times, waited, but no answer. It wasn't long before Mrs. Jenkins, the nosy neighbor from across the street, came out. "Looking for your family, Anna?" she called out from her porch, her voice carrying a mix of concern and curiosity. "Yeah, do you know where they went?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, they packed up some bags and drove off early this morning. Said something about a weekend trip. Didn't they tell you?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "No, they didn't," I managed to say, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "How could they just leave me behind like that?" Mrs. Jenkins shook her head, muttering something about some parents before disappearing back into her house. I sat down on the front steps, not sure what to do or feel. The sky started to darken, and as the street lamps flickered on, the reality of my situation sunk in. I was truly alone. Hours must have passed before I finally stood up and made my way to Aunt Emily's apartment. The walk felt longer than usual, each step heavier with the weight of abandonment. When I finally got there and knocked, Aunt Emily opened the door almost immediately, worry etched all over her face. "What's wrong, Anna? What are you doing here so late?" she asked, pulling me inside. "Mom and Dad, they went away for the weekend. They locked the house and didn't tell me. I didn't know where else to go," I confessed, my voice breaking as the tears I'd held back started to flow. Aunt Emily's face hardened as she heard this, her usually warm eyes now sparking with anger. "They did what? That's it. I'm calling your father." She dialed the number, and after a few tense moments, Dad answered. I could only hear one side of the conversation, but Aunt Emily's tone was enough to tell me it wasn't going well. "Yes, Michael, your daughter, my niece, is here with me because you left her behind," she snapped into the phone. "No, this isn't just a little mistake. You can't just lock your child out and take off for the weekend." There was a pause as she listened to whatever excuse he was making up on the other end. "Well, if that's how you feel, then maybe Anna should just stay with me from now on." "Yeah, maybe that's for the best." She hung up before he could respond, her chest heaving with every angry breath. Then, turning to me, her expression softened. "You're staying here tonight, Anna. And as long as you need to. We'll figure this out together." Over the next few days, Aunt Emily made arrangements for me to stay with her permanently. My parents didn't object, perhaps out of indifference. Either way, it didn't matter to me anymore. Life with Aunt Emily was a breath of fresh air after everything that had happened. Even though her apartment was small and our budget tighter than ever, it felt like a mansion compared to the emotional prison of my parents' house. One Saturday morning, we sat at the tiny kitchen table, planning our budget with more precision than a military operation. Aunt Emily had always been resourceful, and now she passed on those skills to me. We clipped coupons, planned our meals around grocery sales, and even started a small herb garden on the windowsill to save money on spices. "So, we've got $20 left for the month. Think we can splurge on a little ice cream?" Aunt Emily asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I laughed, shaking my head. "Only if it's on sale. Remember, we're the queens of bargains now." That light-hearted moment underscored our new reality. We were in this together, come what may. School became another arena where I had to adjust. At first, I was the girl whose family drama was whispered about in the corridors. But I held my head high, focusing on my studies and finding solace in books and learning. Mrs. Carter, my English teacher, noticed my diligence. One day after class, she called me over. "Anna, I've seen you pushing yourself hard this year. Ever thought of joining the debate team?" I hesitated, unsure. "I don't know, Mrs. Carter. I'm not sure I'd be any good at arguing." She smiled, her gaze kind but firm. "It's not just about arguing, Anna. It's about learning to stand up and speak out. Think about it." I did think about it, and with a nudge from Aunt Emily, I joined. Debate turned out to be more than just a club, it was a place where I could hone my voice, a skill I'd need more than I realized. Aunt Emily was my biggest cheerleader. "You're going to knock them dead at the competition," she'd say every time I left for a debate meet, her pride evident even though she tried to play it cool. Life wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving, about building something new from the ashes of my old life. Aunt Emily and I became a team, both of us working part-time jobs to keep afloat. She found work at a local library while I took a weekend job at a coffee shop. One evening, as we counted our month's earnings and updated our budget ledger, Aunt Emily put down her pen and looked at me seriously. "Anna, I think it's time you think about college. You've got the brains for it. We can make it work, somehow." From that day on, our plans included college. We researched scholarships late into the night, crafted essays, and filled out applications with painstaking care. Each acceptance letter was a victory, every scholarship a triumph, not just for me, but for us both. College was a whirlwind. I hit the books hard, fueled by every memory of being underestimated back home. Living on campus was different from anything I'd experienced, but I adapted quickly, driven by a mix of excitement and the pressure to prove myself. My roommate, Jess, became one of my closest friends. She was studying business, and we'd often sit up late into the night, swapping study tips and planning our futures. "You ever think about what you'll do after this, Anna?" Jess asked one evening, her book sprawled across our tiny dorm room floor. "I'm going all the way," I replied without hesitation. "Law school. I want to make a difference, you know? Really change things." I thrived on it, pushing myself to be better every day. The long hours and endless reading were exhausting, but every time I wanted to quit, I'd think of Aunt Emily and her belief in me, and that would be enough to keep me going. During my final year, one of my professors, Professor Carter, called me into his office. He was a stern man, known for his tough grading, but he respected hard work. "Anna, your thesis on family law was exceptional. Have you thought about where you might want to work after graduation?" he asked, peering at me over his glasses. "I've been looking at several firms, sir. I want somewhere I can really get into family law, maybe even start a specialty in it," I said, trying to sound as confident as I felt. "Well, I have a recommendation for you. A firm downtown is looking for bright, new talent. I can put in a good word," he offered, his tone suggesting it wasn't an offer he made lightly. "Thank you, Professor Carter. I'd appreciate that very much," I replied, a mix of gratitude and excitement swirling in my chest. I landed the job at the firm right after graduation. It was a prestigious place, the kind where you either sank or swam. I chose to swim. Days turned into nights as I worked on case after case, earning a reputation as a meticulous and fierce advocate. It was at a networking event hosted by the firm where I met Michael, a businessman with a keen interest in the intersections of law and commerce. Our first conversation was about a case I was working on, but it quickly turned personal. 2 years later, we got married in a small ceremony. Aunt Emily was there, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched me say my vows. "You did it, Anna. You really did," she whispered as she hugged me tight. With Michael's support, I took the biggest leap of my career. I opened my own law firm. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, but I was ready for the challenge. We moved to another state where the market was ripe for a new firm, especially one led by a woman with a fresh perspective. Our firm quickly made a name for itself, and as my professional life flourished, so did my personal life. Michael and I welcomed a son, a joyous addition to our family. Life was full, busy, and deeply satisfying. My law firm's success was more than I could have hoped for, and with each successful case, my reputation grew. This caught the attention of local media, and soon, I was invited to speak on TV about domestic violence. The interview went well, sparking discussions across various social platforms. I received an invitation from the governor's office. I was to be recognized for my contributions to child welfare and family law. As I gave my acceptance speech, thanking those who supported me, I saw Aunt Emily wiping away tears. It was a moment of validation for all the hardships we'd endured together. One day, after a particularly long day at the office, I was walking through the parking lot towards my car when I noticed two elderly people looking around uncertainly. As I approached, wondering if they needed help, the recognition hit me hard. They were my parents, who had walked out of my life 20 years ago. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cool, masking the surprise and rising unease. "Oh, Anna, it's you. We saw you on TV, we knew it was you immediately. We've missed you so much and are so proud of all you've accomplished," my mom said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We wanted to reconnect, to be a family again," my dad added, his eyes searching mine for any sign of warmth. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. "My family consists of my aunt, my husband, and my son. You chose to lead that family a long time ago. But instead of understanding, they became more insistent. Anna, you're our daughter. We need your help now. Your brother left us, and our business is failing. We have debts, no savings, and we're about to lose our house," my dad explained, his voice desperate. They even hinted at taking legal action if I refused to help, arguing that as their daughter, it was my duty. I couldn't help but laugh, though it was more from disbelief than amusement. "Really? You think you can intimidate a lawyer into helping you? You might want to think twice about that," I said sharply. Seeing that their threats were getting them nowhere, they shifted tactics, playing on my emotions. "Think about it, Anna. We're your parents. How can you turn us away?" "I remember very clearly," I replied, my voice steady and firm, "how you threw out Aunt Emily and left me behind like I was nothing." Realizing they were getting nowhere, they finally backed down. I handed them some money for their trip back, more out of pity than any sense of duty. "This is all I can do for you. Please, don't contact me again." When I got home, I hugged Michael and our son a little tighter. Aunt Emily greeted me with her usual warm smile, and in that moment, I knew I had everything I needed. After meeting my parents, one question lingered in my mind: what had become of Lucas? I utilized my contacts in the police and political circles to track him down. It took weeks of inquiries and waiting, but finally, I got a lead. Lucas had turned his back on our father's dreams of him becoming a mechanic and instead, had embraced his passion for art, living in a distant artist's commune. I hesitated for a moment before calling him. "Hello?" His voice was cautious, tinged with a curiosity that echoed my own. "Lucas, it's Anna. Your sister," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a pause, heavy with years of unsaid words. "Anna, wow, this is unexpected. I know it's been a long time. I found out where you were. I hope it's okay that I called." Yeah, of course," he replied, the initial shock giving way to a more relaxed tone. "How did you find me?" I asked around. I needed to know you were okay," I admitted. The conversation began awkwardly, with each of us tentatively probing the years we'd missed in each other's lives. We agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes, a neutral ground to rediscover the sibling relationship we'd lost. Sitting across from Lucas a few days later, the initial awkwardness was palpable. "So, you're an artist now?" I ventured, eager to bridge the gap. Lucas smiled, a genuine, proud smile. "Yeah, I am. It's been a tough ride, but I wouldn't change it for anything." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos of vibrant paintings, each a burst of color and emotion. "I'm hoping to make a real go of it." His work was impressive, and I felt a surge of pride. "They're beautiful, Lucas. You've really found your calling." He shrugged modestly. "I'm trying. Dad, he never understood. He wanted me in the shop, but that life was never for me." We talked for hours, gradually easing into a comfortable camaraderie, reconnecting not just as siblings, but as adults who had navigated their own trials. "I could introduce you to some people in the art world," I offered, eager to help him pave his way to success. Lucas shook his head, a determined glint in his eye. "Thanks, Anna, but I need to do this on my own. I want to prove to myself, and maybe a bit to Dad, that I can make it without any handouts." His words echoed my own journey, and I couldn't help but respect his decision. I understand. Just know I'm here, okay? Whatever you need. As we parted ways, Lucas handed me one of his smaller paintings, a beautiful landscape bathed in sunset hues. For you, to remember today. Driving home, I placed the painting on the passenger seat, a smile playing on my lips. Lucas and I were more alike than I'd realized. We were both determined to forge our own destinies, independent yet connected by our shared resilience.